Today, I'm so excited to introduce you all to Sunayana Sen, who is a program manager of Daraja at Resurgence. Thank you so much for joining us. So you work for a project called Daraja, Swahili for Bridge, and it designs inclusive weather and climate services that provide vulnerable communities with the weather information that they need, including the warnings to extreme weather, which is becoming so important given where we're at today and really seeing the climate crisis come to life here on Earth. So can you tell us, one, just kind of summarize why are communities who are in informal settlements, who are highly vulnerable, and how can they really benefit from better access to this weather information? How is this really impacting their lives?
Yeah, absolutely. So communities living in informal settlements are vulnerable due to a number of reasons. But if I just focus on two reasons, one is we find that informal settlements are located in areas that are highly exposed to extreme weather events. So, for example, we see that informal settlements are located right next to rivers, which often in low-lying areas, which oftentimes, come rainy season, it floods on a regular basis. So that's one. One is exposure to weather events. And on top of that, these communities are highly marginalized and lack access to basic public services. So when you put these two things together, it creates such high risk for people, and they don't have the resources to take the necessary action in time to protect themselves and eventually adapt to the changing climate. So that is what makes these communities particularly vulnerable.
And how, it's interesting because today is Gender Day at COP, and we know that 80% of people who are displaced by climate change are women and children. So undoubtedly, those who are living in informal settlements, those who will be impacted by extreme weather events, they're oftentimes women and children. So it's great to talk about this on Gender Day. It's also Science and Innovation Day, and that's really where you come in. So how can these communities really benefit from better access to weather information?
Yes, so ultimately the goal is to improve the climate resilience of these communities. In order to do that, they need to be well equipped with the resources they require to take action, so to take preventative action and then adaptive action. But in order to be in a position to take action, they need access to the information to begin with. So first and foremost, that's our starting point when we work on the Raja. The starting point is to look at whether people have access to information to begin with. If not, what are the challenges that they're facing, and how do we make the situation better? How do we have more people accessing weather information, whether that's your daily forecasts or seasonal forecasts or early warnings?
Yeah, so coming back to the how do you get that information in their hands? Does local media have a role? This is where most people, get that information when it comes to weather, climate services. And what can local media, partners and individuals really do to help communities take that preventative action?
Oh yes, local media plays such an important role. But before I explain a little bit more, I just want to acknowledge that not every country has the same level of maturity when it comes to media and local media. So every country's context is different in this case. But let me give you an example of Nairobi, where we've done the Raja and we've recently finished that project. So in Nairobi, there's a very strong community of local media, so local radio stations specifically. So we work closely with local radio stations to first and foremost help them access forecasts from the National Meteorological Agency, then understand these forecasts, and finally repackage these forecasts in a way that is communicated to their audience, that is, the local communities, in a way that helps them take action. So this involved some training, which we did with BBC Media Action in Nairobi. Some training on helping journalists understand just what the forecast is saying in terms of impact. So it's not just this is the temperature, this is the humidity, this is the probability, but really how is this going to impact the local area that you are based in. So journalists underwent that training, and they had direct communication with national forecasters as well, which helped them have that dialogue with them to further understand what it means. And because of this, they are now better equipped to interpret information in a way that's relevant to their local community. So yes, absolutely, local media plays such an important role, whether that's TV or radio or any other form of media that's local to your community.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear that, because I can imagine how the problem can be very similar across the world, but the way that you approach the solution is quite different, and the different partners and the different formats and the different barriers that are in place that really prevent these communities from having this access. So it's amazing to see that you've joined the Race to Resilience to really help deliver transformative action to build the climate resilience that we need. Can you explain how Daraja is delivering impact in the communities that you're working in?
Yeah, like I said, ultimately the goal is to increase the climate resilience of these communities who are on the front lines of climate change. And we're happy to be a part of Race to Resilience along with other significant initiatives who are doing a great job across the world. In terms of impact that the Raja is delivering, our main focus is on weather and climate information services, and that involves regular weather, like daily forecasts, right up till early warnings. So we work very closely with communities as well as other actors in the system like forecasters, city authority, like government agencies, local NGOs, and local media to revamp the communication system that's carrying these forecasts and early warning messages. So the way we tend to look at it in 3 blocks. The first block being look at what is the level of access people have, and that we've already spoken about. So I won't elaborate that further. Then we look at understanding. So you may be accessing this information, but do you really understand what forecasts are saying? Like in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, where we've done the Raja, people said even for people who were able to access this information, they often came back to us and said, we don't understand what the forecasts are saying because of the terminology that's used, which is highly scientific or meteorological in nature. So we work with forecasters and communities to make the forecasts more understandable, more intuitive. So that's the second block, being able to understand this information. And then the third block is using this information to take action, so connecting information to action. Here we work with our local partners who help communities build capacity or help them understand what kind of actions they can take. For example, actions can range from repairing the roof, before the rainy season begins, based on the seasonal outlook that says there will be excess rain this rainy season. Or it could be something more simple like planning your travel routes or moving your belongings to a safer space so that it doesn't get affected by flooding. So we look at these things in these 3 blocks, and we found that it has resulted in impact in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, and we're currently doing this. We're doing this model in Jamaica as well. So yeah, I mean, whatever we do to help communities transform their lives in this changed climate scenario, to not only survive but to also thrive.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to hear, because when we talk about science and innovation, there's a lot of there's a lot of information that we can give people access to, but you've touched on this really important part of what if people don't understand it? They need to do something with this information, and it needs just to impact and change their lives. So your work on translating that information to be understandable and also actionable is absolutely key. So I'm excited to see how we could really scale this. So can you tell us where else can this model be effective, and what would it take to scale such innovations?
Right. So the model as such, like the core principle that drives this model is co-production. What that means is we're not developing these systems in a silo or, sat in the National Meteorological Agency's office. We're doing this very much in collaboration with communities. Actually, not even in collaboration with communities. Communities are very much at the center of this system, which means whatever is being developed is inclusive in nature and is user-centric. So this model as such can be applied anywhere in the world. As you know, we're doing it in Jamaica at the moment. We've done a version of this with our partners in West Africa, and we're preparing to do this in India. So the model itself can be applied anywhere, but it will have to be contextualized to the reality of the city that we're working in. Yeah, and in terms of what it will take to scale it to many cities in the world, really it comes down to financing and funding mechanisms that help us deploy this in multiple cities at the same time.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. I really hope that everyone's learned more about the power of science and information, but also just communication in not just raising awareness for the climate crisis, but in being able to tangibly help communities take action to build their resilience. And it's so important. Thank you so much for being with us, for enlightening us in this way.